Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar on IT and digital apprenticeships. I'm joined by a couple of colleagues, Russell and Jodie from Intequal. They're going to help us and support us delivering this IT and digital apprenticeships webinar. Give you a few seconds to come in. Essentially, Russell and Jodie are going to take you through the presentation. I'll be available along with them for questions at the end. So you've got a Q&A tab. Please do ask any questions you want. There is no such thing as a silly question. There is no such thing as a question that's too small. So please feel free to ask away. My name's Jodie and I'm from the Solent Apprenticeship Hub, and we are here to offer impartial advice, guidance and support to employers and individuals around all things apprenticeships. Just a few little bits of housekeeping. We are all working from home, so do forgive us if you hear a stray dog barking or a child crying in the background. We do apologise ahead of time. I'm going to hand straight over to Russell and Jodie, and I'll see you again at the end. Thank you.
Thanks, Jodie, and hello everybody, and thanks for coming and joining in this webinar. And no doubt some of you have been out enjoying this gorgeous weather that we're having. So, and I'm sure you'll be going out and enjoying that further at the end of the webinar. And as Jodie said, you know, feel free to ask us absolutely anything you want around IT and digital apprenticeships. My name's Russell. I work for Intequal as a consultant. I do a lot of employer-facing activity, and my colleague Jodie works alongside me in a recruiter capacity, finding young people like yourselves and matching them to the apprenticeships that we generate, and working with the clients that we've been working with for a number of years now. And Jodie will do the last piece of this webinar for us and talk to you directly about CV writing, some employability skills, and just some really good practice that we hope you will take forward and will aid you in getting an apprenticeship, whether or not that's with Intequal or any of the other fantastic providers out there in the southern region. So, IT and digital apprenticeships. So on this first slide, as you can see, we've just got some very general points about apprenticeships and their alternative that they would offer you to maybe going on to further education if you decided that the classroom-based learning is no longer for you, whether or not that's in a college, a sixth form, or higher education and university. Apprenticeships do offer you an alternative. They give you an alternative to achieve industry recognised qualifications as well as gaining experience. As you can see on the top line, a vocational, a work-based learning gives you the experience that employers need. As I've already mentioned, it's a great alternative to further and higher education and industry recognised qualifications. And what I mean by that is that, well, certainly within the IT and digital sector, you have the opportunity, Intequal themselves, and this isn't, I'm not here to promote Intequal, but using us as an example, we deliver vendor qualifications on all of our standards, whether or not that's IT or digital marketing or software development. And they could be Microsoft, they could be Google, they could be CompTIA, any of those qualifications, and they are industry recognised qualifications. And they're something that mainstream education, further or higher education, won't necessarily be able to offer you. Another really good line there, as you can see on line four, earn some money while you're learning. So, you know, I have some employers. I think the minimum wage at the moment is around about £3.90, £4 an hour. But we have some employers that I work with that are willing to pay considerably more than that for the right young person who has the right attitude. So, what you're not going to do, is it says on the final line, if you are coming out of college or sixth form and you are deciding on your next step, you won't incur any debt that you will if you, or you're likely to, unless you're being funded by or sponsored by somebody else. You'll earn and you won't incur that debt for tuition fees and living expenses, etc., etc. Just some basic entry requirements, and I'm going to whiz through this because I think, as it says at the top there, at least a D or a grade 4 for English, Maths or equivalent. Now, I think what is important here to understand is there are some minimum requirements, but we've always encouraged young people not to get too worked up with this. If you haven't quite got those grades, there are opportunities out there for you to do functional skills within an apprenticeship and get that C grade or equivalent that you need. So certainly if you don't have those grades, that isn't a reason not to apply for an apprenticeship. Talk to the apprenticeship provider about what you're missing and what opportunities that you have, to be able to get that minimum requirement. And as it says on there, ideally, a GCSE and A-level or a BTEC in one of the subjects that you're applying that you would like to forge your career in. And whether that's IT or computer science or creative media studies, as it says there, having one of these qualifications will help you to convince an employer, if you like, that you have thought about this. This is the path that you want to go down as your chosen career. And I think the next two lines, a proven interest in the topic and a passion for the subject, should be an absolute given to you. A lot of people who I work with, a lot of the clients that I work with, work in IT because they have a passion for the subject and they're interested from it. They don't only do it for a job, they will go home and do it as a hobby as well. And I think that's, if you're going to be sat in front of an employer, being able to get that across to an employer is going to give you a massive advantage. And there's loads of ways you can do that. As I said, what you've done at school and college absolutely has its place and it's really, really important. But also being able to demonstrate to an employer that you go home and IT or media is an interest. And that may be that you build PCs or you take old laptops and you mend them and sell them on, for a profit maybe, or you host some, you have a server and you host some gaming websites, for platforms for you and your friends. That type of conversation really enriches your application and certainly, what an employer would want to hear, because that, as it says, it demonstrates your enthusiasm and your willingness to learn. And there is a last line there about funding, criteria for funding. There is a criteria and your training provider will be able to talk you through that. Now, just again, another really quick slide about apprenticeships and how they're delivered. And this will vary from provider to provider. You could do 1 day a week in a learning environment at a school or at a college or an academy. You could do a block release, which would be a week a month, or Intequal, for instance. We have a remote delivery solution. So all of our training is delivered via a virtual classroom. And we use Teams, Microsoft Teams, as the platform to develop and create that virtual space. So getting that down to the actual areas that you can learn in the digital and IT sector. For a level 3, there's currently available. There are some more standards that are being developed, but at the moment there are these 7 standards that have been released by the Institute for Apprenticeships and are currently being delivered. Now, not all apprenticeship providers will deliver all of them. They might deliver 3 or 4. Others might deliver a different 3 or 4, and it will just depend on the specialisms that they have from their trainers within that organisation. And I'll pick a couple of these just to mention, and it might be an area that you're interested in. Infrastructure technician is one of the most popular level 3 standards that we deliver and employers are looking for. And if you are somebody who enjoys problem solving and mending, or it could be hardware, both hardware and software, infrastructure technician would be the standard that we would expect you to go on. And entry level, you would go into a help desk environment as a for instance. And on that particular standard, there are 5 different areas of learning, and they would be coding and logic, mobile and operating systems, networking, cloud, and business processes. All of those standards, all of those knowledge areas that you would learn within, link very well into somebody who would want to forge a career in that sort of area of IT. And then you would go onto a help desk, and you could go first line, second line, third line as your knowledge and experience develops. But it might well be that you want to, you would take a sidetrack off that, and you might end up going down a network engineer route. And there's nothing wrong with that, but your entry level for that type of career would be infrastructure technician. Digital marketing, again, a really, really popular standard, and one that we are very heavily subscribed for. And this is maybe somebody one of you that want to work in the digital sector, who might be a little bit more creative rather than on the engineering side. So it may well be that you really want to work with social media and websites, and working with SEO and writing content. And of course, over the last decade or so, particularly, the area of digital marketing has seen an enormous area of growth as the internet and the associated technologies has continued to advance digital marketing. And many companies are now moving away from the old traditional forms of marketing and taking everything online. I'm sure all of you are on Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat. Probably not Facebook anymore. I think that's maybe for an older internet generation, but something like Snapchat. So you would have seen the content and marketing that's on there, and behind that will be people who are forging careers in digital marketing. Software developer. Would be an area that you want to go to if you enjoy coding. So if you've done a computer science A level, for instance, you may have already started to learn some languages, sort of around Python or HTML5 or PHP, for instance, and you want to go down that route. Again, you may be a little bit, you're more creative. You want to actually produce something rather than fix it. So a software developer would be the route to go down. And that, I'm not going to go through all of them. You can find details of all of these online if you go onto the Institute of Apprenticeships website. They're very easy. To find, and you can look at the types of skills that are delivered. Level 4. So if you've done a level 3, your employer may well want then to invest in you further, and you can go on and do a level 4. They tend to be a little bit longer, whereas a level 3 is normally delivered over 15 months. A level 4, generally speaking, are 18 months to 2 years long. But what they would do is they would very much build on the knowledge that you've already gained from your level 3 apprenticeship. However, it's worth noting here, you don't have to have done a level 3 apprenticeship to do a level 4. For some of our applicants that may already have some qualifications that they've gone and gained, that they've self-funded themselves, and maybe a little bit more advanced, and they just don't have only a BTEC or an A level. Then there is the possibility that you can entry level into a level 4 qualification. Again, they all deliver vendor quals on there, but it's very much then that next step. Whereas on the level 3, you'll do a lot of fundamental training, so learning the real sort of building blocks and the core skills. The level 4 would then hope to build on them and really take them to that next level. Really tough ask. It's a big commitment, but the reward at the end of doing a level 4 qualification is enormous, and very, very attractive to an employer, because of the commitment and because of the level of qualifications and the core skills that you've learnt on there. They're really usable and very desirable to an employer. And as you can see on there, there are different routes at the moment that are available: network engineer, software developer, software tester. These are the ones that have been released so far by the Institute of Apprenticeships. There are some more that are being developed. So as you can see, there's a blend of the different areas that you can go down and learn. Some typical employers in this sector. So these are the type of employers that I work with: managed service providers. And for those of you who don't know what an MSP is, they will offer the IT support to non-IT companies. So it could be a big manufacturing base, for instance, a car plant that produces Minis or BMWs or something like that. They will employ, if they don't have an in-house IT team, they will have a contract with a managed service provider to support their IT infrastructure. So if you are somebody who wants to have that support capacity, and that's the route in IT that you want to take, you enjoy mending dad's laptop or your grandma's PC because they're not IT savvy, and that's the route that you want to go down, that's the type of employer that you should be looking for. Developers, again, it does what it says on the tin. They're people that create programs, applications and software for different uses across the whole of industry and commerce. Digital marketing agencies, again, they would do the marketing for non-marketing companies. So, that content that you see on Snapchat that's trying to sell you, some sort of commodity, there'll be a digital marketing agency sat somewhere that are full of creative and really bright, enthusiastic people will be creating that content, and they'll be selling that to that business that wants to, market their products. Just some, we put this together, and there are far too many routes within IT and the digital sector to mention. As you will appreciate, it's a very fluid sector that's constantly changing almost daily with new technologies, and the rise of cloud technologies, for instance, has had a huge impact on the sector. But as you can see there, and it's something that I've already alluded to on the previous slides, just some areas that you may want to go and work in. So a help desk support engineer, a social media analyst, or a data scientist. And these are the routes and the career routes that you could take. And just some things to consider there, and we've used this slide for a couple of years now, and it is quite an interesting one, because it is a compare and contrast, if you like, because we are advocates of apprenticeships and we are advocates of vocational training, of course, because that's what we do for a living, and we're here to promote this route because we recognise that further education and higher education isn't for everybody. So it's to give some people, if you like, people that may be a little bit nervous, if you like, of coming out of mainstream education and taking a different route. There are some really salient reasons why you shouldn't be nervous, that this is a tried and tested way for you to develop your career. And if you look back across the British economic past, then apprenticeships have a huge footprint in our engineering and manufacturing and digital past. As you can see, I'm not going to go through every line on there. They're there for you to see. Of course, this webinar is going to be available on YouTube, so you can go back to this as a reference point. There is one line on there that I am going to explain what we mean, though, and that's the second line down, where it says up-to-date knowledge in the sector against outdated information on courses in some cases. Now that isn't meant as a swipe at university, not by any stretch of the imagination. But what we're saying there is apprenticeships work with businesses that are right at the forefront and the cutting edge of the IT and digital sector. These are the creators, if you like, of the content that ends up on university degree courses. Universities just simply cannot react quickly enough to industry to have the absolute up-to-date technologies written into degree programs. It's just a simple fact of life. As I say, we're not taking a swipe at university. We're just saying something that is a fact. And I just wanted to put some, if you like, some meat, if you like, onto that line. And I think the piece there, the line right at the bottom of that, although you can do an apprenticeship and then go to university, is really important one, because you can't always go to university and then do an apprenticeship. And the reason for this is because even though you do pay some funding, you also do draw down funding at university to do a level 6 qualification. And what the government won't do is, if you, for instance, have gone and done a degree in computer science, you can't then get funding necessarily for a level 3 apprenticeship, because the two areas of learning are too similar. So it's worth bearing that in mind. Of course, you have the option of degree apprenticeships now, so that's worth considering also. So, of course, although that we are advocates for apprenticeships, the future is yours, and the choice is yours, of course. Be sure to make the decisions that you make based on fact, and go and find those facts. Go and speak to people like us who are the industry experts, or the guys at the Solent Apprenticeship Hub who are just like us, super enthusiastic about vocational training and apprenticeships. I will come back on after my colleague, but I will hand over to my colleague Jodie now, who's going to run through some slides just to help you with some employability skills.
Thank you, Russell. So I'm going to talk you through some CV writing, some interview tips, and also some best practice for making applications. So CV writing, layout and format is absolutely key. Obviously, you want your CV to be clear and concise. More often than not, it is the first sort of part of you, so to speak, that an employer or a recruiter will see. So you want to make it clear and concise and to the point. CVs should always be typed, not handwritten, no more than 2 pages long, must include your name and contact details, should be laid out in certain sections. We would expect to see a personal statement that is geared towards the job that you want to do. It's very much tailored to the role that you're applying for. A list of your relevant skills, education and qualification history, experience, whether that's voluntary or work experience, part of year 10 or possibly year 12, and also paid roles you've done in the past. Hobbies and interests as well, we would expect to see, and again, are relevant to what you're applying for. Now, because you only get sort of 2 pages to sort of sell yourself to an employer, I wouldn't necessarily include a list of contact details for references. A line to say references are available upon request will do. It keeps sort of people's contact details safe, and also sort of saves that space on your CV. Now, don't claim to know things on a CV that you don't. You will get found out, whether that's when you're speaking to a recruiter or in front of an employer. If they quiz you on something that you don't necessarily know much about, but you put on your CV, then they will find out, and that could sort of work against you. Make sure when you are creating your CV that you carry out a spelling and a grammar check. Recruiters don't like to open them up and see sort of blue and red squiggly lines all over the place. And make your CV relevant. This is such an important point. It shouldn't sort of be the same one that you've used in the past when applying so when you're making applications, you would be reading through a job description. Make sure that you meet the criteria for what it is that you're applying for. If you're not sure, then
Russell, it seems like Jodie's having a connection issue.
I can pick up on this and talk through that. That's not a problem. I think the line for me that's really key on this particular slide is not to make claims about things that you say you know about and then you don't. What you've got to understand is, whilst myself and Jodie work in this sector, we are not technology experts. If you put on your CV that you know about networking, for instance, and you understand how Cisco works, we wouldn't necessarily have the skills to be able to quiz you enough to know whether or not you're telling us the truth, whereas an employer will. And if you sit in front of an employer and they say, okay, then, John, whatever, tell us about networking and protocols and routers and switches and how that works, because you've put it on your CV, and they're then expecting you to give this big piece on routers and switches and networking and intrusion, fail safes, etc., and you can't, then that's going to be really embarrassing for you. And the line that I always use when I have these conversations with applicants is, and it's not meant as a glib comment, employers aren't expecting Bill Gates to walk in the door. They're just simply not expecting that. It's okay not to know stuff. You're 16, 17, 18, 19 maybe. It's okay not to know it. But what it's important to do is get across to the employer, I don't know that, Mr. Employer, but will you teach me? That's that level of enthusiasm. That's what an employer will want to hear. Jodie, do you want to pick up again? I can see your mic's on mute. Do you want to pick up on the next slide and see if we can?
Sorry,
you dropped out.
Bad connection. So where do we get to? So making applications, make sure that you meet the criteria for what it is that you're applying for. And if you're not sure, then contact the recruiter. If they're anything like me, they love talking to people. So they'll be happy to sort of talk you through sort of the roles that you would be a good fit for. They'll talk about your interests, sort of see where you want your career to lead, and they'll be able to help you sort of find something that sort of would be a good fit. Also, if you don't tick the boxes for a job you are looking at, they may be working on something else, so they could sort of put you forward for that role. Make sure when you're looking at your commute, when you're looking at jobs, that the commute is easy enough to do every day, probably about an hour each way, we would say. Also, if it's driving, sort of maybe 20 miles, 22 miles, take into account fuel costs or parking, that sort of thing. And if it's public transport you're using, we'd say probably maybe only one change, just in case you were sort of late for one bus, missed your connection, or there are any delays, that sort of thing. When it comes to making applications, make sure that you use a tailored, up-to-date CV and cover letter. So whenever you sort of finish a job, make sure you've updated that on your CV. If ever you gain another qualification, pop that on there as well. Make sure that it's up-to-date sort of to the day that you're applying. Make sure when you're applying that you get your enthusiasm and interest across in your application forms. This is quite often sort of one of the deciding factors that we as recruiters look at. People that write about how enthusiastic they are and interested in a subject, as Russell alluded to earlier, sort of things that you do in your own time, sort of self-teaching a bit of code or building computers. Pop that on there because it looks really good and strengthens your application. If you see what appears to be the same job advertised more than once, sort of across different job boards, my advice would be to apply for them all. Sometimes they can be posted on different platforms, or they can be advertised by different training providers. So just apply for them all, just to increase your chances, really. Social media next. Sometimes a potential employer will check sort of social media accounts. So if you do have pages on social networking sites, turn those to private or remove anything that you wouldn't want a potential employer to see. Just you wouldn't want anything to sort of work against you. If you have a blog or a social media account or something similar that you use to portray past work or projects that you've done, put links to those on your CV or in a cover letter so that potential employers can see examples of your work. They absolutely love that, and it can put you sort of heads above the rest. Creating a LinkedIn account to showcase your professionalism, that's a good tool to use as well. LinkedIn, it's kind of like an online CV. You can connect with people like myself, recruiters. You can connect with people that work in companies that are of interest to you. You can keep up to date with news sort of in the sectors that you're interested in, and sometimes there are jobs advertised on LinkedIn that aren't necessarily advertised on other job boards, so that is a good tool to use as well. Face-to-face interviews and best practice now. So make sure when you are attending a face-to-face interview that you know what time to be there, where you need to go, and who it is that you're meeting, who you need to ask for when you arrive. Always plan your journey in advance, allow time for unexpected delays. So if that's driving, sort of 20 minutes extra to allow for traffic or finding somewhere to park. And also if it's public transport, you don't sort of want to be late for any reason sort of that's out of your control. Get your smart clothes ready in advance. Take a copy of your CV, your national insurance number and a form of ID with you. Now it's better to have these things and not need them than need them and not have them. Arrive early, between 10 or 15 minutes. We wouldn't say any more than that, just in case you sort of run into another applicant who's leaving an interview, or the interviewer could be eating their lunch or in a meeting, something like that. And always let them know if you're running late. Obviously, things do happen that are outside of our control sometimes, but just keep them updated, keep them informed if you're running late. At the point of interview, don't just talk about sort of the benefits to you. A face-to-face interview, or a telephone interview for that matter, is a chance for you to showcase your skills, what you can bring to the business, and is a chance to talk through sort of what you can do to help them, how you feel you'd best fit the role. So don't just talk about sort of the benefits that are going to be sort of paid to you. Talk about how you can benefit them. At the end, always thank them for their time. Say you hope to hear from them soon. They will normally give you a bit of an idea as to when you can expect to hear back from them. So best practice for interviews overall, prepare. That is the best advice that I could possibly give you. Make sure that you've read through the job advert and you've researched the company before you speak to them or meet with them. They will ask you things about what you know about the business. So it's always a good idea to research their products, their services, and their mission statement as well, just to sort of see what their aims are. Take time considering answers to questions. Don't always blurt out the first thing that comes to mind, and always give examples to back these up. So if you've been in a situation before, use that as an example so they can sort of gauge how you could deal with a situation. Speak professionally, avoid using filler words and slang terms. Although you may be nervous and it's easier said than done, smile. At the end of the day, it's just a conversation with another person about something you would have sort of a common interest in. Have some questions ready for the interviewer. It's nice to sort of keep the conversation going, and you can ask them things along the lines of how long have you worked at the company, what do you enjoy working here the most, and where do you see the company in a couple of years, how do you expect it to grow, things along those sorts of lines. And then a day or so later, I'd follow up with an email just to say thank you. It sort of keeps you at the forefront of their mind, really. And then I think it's opening for questions.
Thanks, Jodie.
Thank you, Jodie. Thank you, Russell. You've got obviously all of Intequal's contact details there. Anything you wanted to close on, Russell, or should we go into Q&A?
No, not necessarily. Not really. I think I think the point that I really want to get across to the young people that have come here today is enthusiasm and interest is really, really key, and you have lots of opportunities along the way when you're making applications to get that over. Don't waste them. There is nothing more frustrating than receiving a CV of a young person that's applying for an IT role that doesn't mention IT anywhere on their CV. It's a showcase. It's your window to kick a door in somewhere, to make a recruiter like Jodie sit up and take notice of you. It's really, really competitive out there. Super, super competitive. You've just got to try to be the best you can and to stand out. And if you don't succeed, don't take it personally, because it's not personal. That's
some really good advice there, Russell. Thank you. I'll just put our contact details page up as well. We do offer one-to-one advice and guidance. So if you are thinking about IT and perhaps have a few more questions that you'd like to answer or speak to one of our advisors about, our contact details are there. Please just fill out the contact us page and we'll be back in contact with you to book a half an hour slot. Right, we've got lots of questions for you guys. First one in.
Fantastic.
What is the lowest and highest level of IT apprenticeships available?
So lowest level, there are some level 2 qualifications available. Generally speaking, you would go in on a level 3, so you'd go in on an advanced apprenticeship. But there are now degree apprenticeships in IT. So a level 6 qualification, that's the highest level that you can get. There aren't, to my knowledge, any plans to do a master's apprenticeship, but I'm sure at some point in the future that may well be an option. But yeah, anything from level 2, level 3, level 4, right up to a degree apprenticeship.
Yeah, we're really lucky actually in the Solent area in that we've got Solent University who's specialising in the digital degree apprenticeship. So yeah, there's a lot on offer there, isn't there? Right, moving on to the next question.
Absolutely.
With IT technology constantly developing, do you find that existing staff are also massively encouraged to develop through apprenticeships to ensure their knowledge matches industry standards?
Absolutely. We've seen an enormous increase in the amount of upskilling of staff that are already in place. The introduction of the apprenticeship levy has certainly helped in along the way, because big businesses are using some of their levy pot or all of their levy pot in some instances to upskill existing staff. So they will put them. It could be somebody who has been on working on a help desk, knows what to do and where everything goes, but actually doesn't have the qualifications to prove that. So what businesses can do is put them onto an apprenticeship, and then they can gain that accreditation. And what is also important to understand here is people like Microsoft and Cisco and some of the really big vendors out there. You can be, for instance, a Microsoft partner. So you can be a small business partner, a silver partner, a gold partner. Us, Intequal, we're a Microsoft learning partner, as are lots of other training providers. Now, in order, particularly with technology, in order to have some of that accreditation, say for instance, you were a Microsoft Gold standard in cloud technologies, in order to maintain that badge that you have on your website, you need to prove that a certain amount of your staff have an accreditation in cloud technologies. So what businesses are doing, and particularly bigger businesses now, is they're using maybe their levy pot to subsidize, if you like, that accreditation to keep their staff up to date and to give them those qualifications. But I think it's a really good question, actually, because it absolutely goes back to the point that I was making on the compare and contrast slide. University doesn't give you, lecturers at university just won't necessarily be up to date with the latest technologies. It's just a fact of life. Whereas if you go into a business and you're working with senior engineers, these are the guys that are creating it, so that you're absolutely getting the very latest knowledge and technologies. Great question.
Okay, moving on to the next one. What's the average salary of someone who has just completed an IT apprenticeship?
What we're finding at the moment, it's somewhere, and Jodie can correct me if I'm wrong, and Jodie is particularly keen on this area, because we talk to young people about it all the time. And another really good question. Generally speaking, at the moment, it's somewhere between around about 18 to 22,000, there or thereabouts. Sometimes it might, it could be, a smaller SME who doesn't have the ability to pay a big. It might only be 16. You might go to another employer who's a little bit bigger, and you might get 24. But generally speaking, and I
Yeah.
think that's right, Jodie, isn't it? The last time we were looking around about that sort of mark.
Lovely.
So it's decent, you know. It's a decent salary, and not too distant from a graduate entry level salary, I must say.
Can you give some ideas of what large employers take on IT apprenticeships in the South?
Well, I mean, there are lots. I mean, you've got IBM has a big imprint in the South, although IBM have their own apprenticeship program because they're big enough to actually develop their own. They don't, they've got a bespoke version. But when I started in this industry, I couldn't believe how many, and I've been doing this for 10 years. I couldn't believe how many IT companies there are, and particularly in the south of England. Particularly Thames Valley, that sort of area, where you have people like Oracle are there, Microsoft are in the Thames Valley, Thames Valley Park. So, it would depend on where the area of IT that you wanted to work, but they're the sort of players that you would be looking at.
I think it's always really interesting as well to mention the likes of any big brand name, whether it be McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, whoever, the real well-known brand names. They all have IT departments, so they may be an IT company, but they'll absolutely have an IT department. Right, moving on.
Absolutely, because I was just going to, just to validate that point, if you like, Jodie, if you've got somebody like McDonald's who've probably got 15,000 end users of their software in the country, they need an IT department. So, you aren't necessarily always restricted just to go to work, I think is what the point you were making, Jodie. You don't have to work for an IT company to work in IT.
Absolutely. Right, next question. What advice would you give someone who's very keen to start an IT career but has no idea which aspect? Would you suggest doing a generic apprenticeship, and if so, what would that be?
Wow, that's a really good question. This is a conversation that we've had loads of times, Jodie, haven't we? Because listen, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was 16, 17. Well, I did. I wanted to be a footballer, but unfortunately, I had 2 left feet, and I was rubbish. So, I think the best advice that I can give is okay. You might not know exactly the area of IT specifically that you want to work in, but you should have some sort of understanding of. There are 2 distinct. I guess there are 2 distinct parts of IT. There are the menders and the fixers, and there are the creators. So have some sort of view as to which one you sit in, and then that will give you, and then speak to somebody like Jodie or myself, who can then talk you through what standard. Because you're absolutely right, and there's really fantastic questions we're getting. You don't want to pigeonhole yourself in one particular area. However, what I've always said is, don't go and do a software developer apprenticeship, because that's all you could get when you want to be a network engineer, because you're going to really struggle to then get some more funding in order to go down the network engineer route. So try and have a real think as to which side of the fence that you sit with IT and digital. Jodie, anything further to add there to that? And I know this is a conversation.
Not really. Just have a chat with someone like myself or the Solent Apprenticeship Hub. They can have a look and sort of gauge where you want to sort of be in a couple of years' time, where your interests are at the moment, and sort of but come to give you some ideas as to what career paths are available. So just talking to people and keeping your options open is probably the best way to go.
Yeah.
Amazing, thank you. Now on to our last question. Would someone in his 30s be able to get an apprenticeship, or would it be too late?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. We have an apprentice now who is 47. I think they've been on programme about 6 months or so. Up until about 2 years ago, you couldn't have done. There was I think 24, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Was the age. There was
Yeah.
the cut off. But no, all those barriers have now been taken away. I think that, and quite rightly so. Is an absolute piece of innovation to open up vocational training across the board. It links very much back to one of my answers from a previous question, with companies using their levy pot for upskilling staff who, generally speaking, would be older. So you're putting, staff onto an apprenticeship. So absolutely not a barrier. Your age is not a barrier. And being an older apprentice is some employers it is a barrier, but they're very, very few and far between, and that's me being absolutely as honest as I possibly can. But of course, as an older learner, you bring a whole other load of skills to the party as well, because you've got some life experience under your belt already. You may well have worked in another sector, but some of that knowledge and those experiences are transferable. So don't age is not a barrier, and I would encourage you, to speak to us, to speak to the guys at the hub or any other provider out there, because there are some fantastic opportunities available for older apprentices, and I choose my words very carefully.
So I think that concludes all our questions. So especially thank you, Russell and Jodie, for joining us. That was
You're welcome.
Really useful information there. I'm sure a lot of people have come away with a far better understanding of what IT and digital apprenticeships are. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
You are welcome.
Thank you. Just to rehash what I said just previously before, if you want some one-to-one advice and guidance, please do use the contact us part of our website. Email address is on there. Pop us an email, follow us on social media, and we'll do our best to answer your questions and pass you on to providers just like Intequal to give you that step forward, that step up in your career. You'll see that there's a link come up on your screens now. Just click on that link and it will take you through to our contact us page, where you can request a specific date and time that you want to be called, or we can do Zoom, anything really you want. Thank you again. That concludes our webinar on IT and digital. Thank you.